once again, Christian greetings to all our valued listeners and viewers throughout the whole world, more particularly to all spiritual believers, and most especially to our beloved brothers and sisters in the United States of America. Special greetings to our brethren in Colorado, in Fiji Island, in Mexico, Spain, in Africa, to the United Kingdom, and to our brethren in Australia, and to the rest of the 144,000 living saints scattered abroad. Greetings, and may the good Lord bless you. Have a wonderful evening. This is our episode number 13, and the subject, the day of slaughter, and hoping that God would help us to bestow unto us heavenly wisdom and understanding. Now, first of all, I would like to say that we need to distinctly separate the purification that takes place in the holy place, the purification that takes place in the most holy place, the purification which is pointing to the militant church, and the purification which is pointing to the triumphant church, the last ordained ministry, which is called the sons of Levi. Now, I would like to read the statement in tract number 1, pages 25 and page 26. It says, in this scripture too is seen the purification of the church, for the bad ones are taken away from among the good, and not the good from among the bad. That is, the bad that are in the net, which is the church, are thrown out, and the good ones kept. So, tract number 1, page 25 and page 26. So, the reading is very plain. The only proceedings, which is called purification of the church, if it is the bad or the wicked, have been taken out from among the righteous, and not the righteous taken out from among the wicked. Or in other words, in the two sections of separation, only the first section is called the purification of the church. For example, to make a simple illustration, let us, for example, this is the church, and if the wicked are taken out in their midst, so this church have been purified. But if the proceedings, for example, this is the church, and the righteous have been taken out, the righteous are taken out in their midst, then of course illogical to say that this church had been purified. But the one that had been purified are those who have been taken out from this church. And in other words, in order for them to reach such purity, God will take them out from this church. So in this process, we can easily discern that this church must be purified first, but it's after this church had been purified, that is the time that the righteous from different churches will be taken out and be brought into this purified church. So that is the occurrence. But in the heavenly sanctuary, it is pertaining to the Lamb's Book of Life. Lamb's Book of Life, not sealed with 7 seals. This book must be purified, must be cleansed. All the names of the wicked will be blotted out in this book. So it is the names of the wicked will be blotted out in this book. And it is called the first section of separation. And those that have been left, the righteous, their names will be transcribed in the book, Lamb's Book of Life, which is already sealed with 7 seals. And this is the book to be brought to the presence of God the Father in the most holy place. Now, to repeat again, let us distinctly separate the purification in the holy place, in the heavenly sanctuary, that is blotting out of names in the Lamb's Book of Life, whereas the purification in the most holy place is blotting out of sins, the sins of the righteous. So the statement in tract number 5, 110, saying it is not measured, meaning investigated, because it represents those among whom there are no bed to be cast out, for they are gathered in after the cleansing of the heavenly temple. First, pointing to the gathering into the Lamb's Book of Life, or in other words, their names will be inscribed into the Lamb's Book of Life after the Lamb's Book of Life are completely cleansed from all the names of the wicked. And at the time when that cleansing is completely finished, then commence the ingathering of the great multitude, first pointing to the proceedings in the heavenly sanctuary, meaning inscribing their name in the Lamb's Book of Life, by which at that time, God will no longer allow that there are still names of the wicked to be entered therein. So the statement that the great multitude will be converted to the message after the cleansing of the heavenly temple, that is pointing to the blotting out of names, not blotting out of sins. During the time of the conversion of the great multitude, the proceedings in the most holy place are still in progress, blotting out of sins. And it will be finished to the general close of provision. So the cleansing mentioned here, by which such cleansing will be finished before the commencement of the loud cry to the great multitude. And that is why the shepherd's rod says that the great multitude will be converted to the message after the purification. Now here in tract number 12, page 45, it says, the second fruits, however, those that are still in Babylon, after the purification, are taken from among the bad, Revelation 18 verse 4, rather than the bad from among the good, Matthew 13 verse 14. Now, brethren, of course, there are only two description of separation. For example, this is the church. The first section, the wicked is taken out from among them. And there's another church. It is the righteous that had been taken out from among them. And according to the shepherd's rod, that is the description of the separation in the great multitude. But it cannot be construed that such separation is not applied to the first fruits. Now, for example, I would like to read to you here in 1SR, page 29. The sealing of the 144,000 is the separation of the faithful from the disloyal ones. Then it says, the purification of the church. Now, so this reading is very plain. It is the faithful that had been taken out from the disloyal ones. And that is during the sealing of the 144,000. And that is not pointing to the sealing of the great multitude, the second fruits. So, to shorten our study, let us face the reality. Among the media today, there are different denominations, different groups, and the shepherd's rod declared clearly in tract number 6, pages 3 and page 4, since there is only one truth, and since no two sects are in absolute agreement as to what it is, naturally, not all can be right, but all, save one, must be wrong. Among the media today, all of them claim that they are the right movement. Of course, that is natural. But 100% among the media today, all must be wrong, save that one movement, recognized by God as His. For God recognizes only one church. That is the reality. In 1SR 242, it says, for He recognizes only one church as His. 1SR 242, for God recognizes only one church as His. Only one church God recognizes as His church. And it reminds me the statement in 11 Symbolic Code number 7, page 3 and 4, taken from Testimonies, volume 5, page 688 and 689. It says, when controversy or division comes in, all parties claim to be right and to have a conscience void of offense. 11 Symbolic Code, number 7, page 3 and 4. Therefore, the choice must be rest to its individual soul, because all movements claim to be right, and all of them have conscience void of offense. But God recognizes only one church as His. And in 2SR 125, it says, 2SR page 125, God has never had more than one movement in existence at a time, and it could not be otherwise now, for Christ cannot be divided. 1 Corinthians chapter 1 verse 13. God's church is well marked in every generation by obedience to present. One of the divine earmark that you can recognize, that is the church recognized by God as His, because the present truth is deposited by God into that movement. Because present truth comes only from God. 11 Symbolic Code number 3, page 5. And logically, God will not entrust His present truth to a movement by which He does not recognize them as His movement. And so that is very important to know what is the present truth for today and what constitutes meat in due season. Now, here in track 14, page 22, it says, here in prophetic utterance is not only a promise to purify the church when modern Assyria is being crushed, but also a suggestive statement as to what constitutes meat in due season for men today, and as to what movement they are to enlist in if they would make sure of salvation. Track number 14, page 22. So that is very plain, brothers and sisters. What movement we are to enlist in if we want to make sure of salvation? The shepherd says that since there is no other movement by which inspiration recommends to have us join, in 2TG 34:23, since the revelation, the book that speaks to the people of God at this time, I think the book of Revelation is speaking more directly in our days than in the days of Beethoven. Since the revelation, the book that speaks to the people of God at this time, recommends the sect that keeps the commandments and that has the gift of prophecy, you cannot wisely connect yourself with any other sect. The only sect, the only movement that the Bible recommends us to have us join, to connect ourselves, must be the movement by which they keep the commandments of God and at the same time has the gift of prophecy. Therefore, if you connect yourself to a movement by which deprived of the gift of prophecy, then you foolishly connect yourself in that sect. Deprived, I think that is the statement used by inspiration. And you know what? Accordingly, in 1TG, it says here, number 15, on page 5, having deprived themselves of the gift of the spirit of prophecy by doing away with the prophets, they completely cut off heaven's communication line and were thus left in gross darkness and lead into error, fanaticism, and crime. They became self-sufficient, proud, boastful, and high-minded. I do fully believe that any movement without the gift of prophecy among them is running without being sent by God, as stated by the shepherd in answerer number 4, page 80. Besides, for what they are now doing, they do not even lay claim to the command of inspirational authority. So not having the prophetic gift among them, the group must be running without being sent. This reading can be easily understood that the only movement recognized by God as His, the only movement sent by God, is the movement by which the prophetic gift, the gift of prophecy, has been bestowed by God unto them. That is very plain in 2TG 34, page 22, saying, 2TG 34, page 23, it says, and since God so declares, who declared it? It is God Himself. It must be that there is but one such people at this particular time. There must be one group of people who have the living testimony of Jesus Christ. the gift of the spirit of prophecy. Moreover, for God to place the gift with more than one people would be for him to cause confusion and disaster to his own work, to thwart his own purpose. Still further, if more than one has the gift, then they all would necessarily have to agree as one. But since there are no two sects that agree with each other, the truth that there is but one sect that has the gift is an absolute reality. And while you may choose to keep the Sabbath commandment, you cannot inspire yourself with the spirit of prophecy. This gift is bestowed upon the remnant by God himself. 2TG 34, page 23. Now let us go back again to our subject, brothers and sisters. Purification. The word purification is a noun. It is a period of time, and it is a process. Here in 1 SR 178, it says, this purifying process will not be an easy matter on the part of sinners, for refiner's fire and fuller's soap is being used, and when God gets through with this washing process, he will have a people pure and clean. Then there will be a glorious time with joy and gladness in the Lord, as it is with a woman in travail. But when a son is born, there is great joy. Now, the shepherd says that purification, it is a process. There is a purifying process. So purification is a period of time. Let us distinctly separate the purification done in the heavenly sanctuary and the purification done on the earthly sanctuary. The word purification is also called cleansing. And the shepherd's rod made it so plain. In track number 3, page 53, it says, this startling revelation shows conclusively that the cleansing according to Daniel 8 verse 14 is first of the sanctuary in heaven and second of the sanctuary on earth. So that is very plain. So the statement in track number 3, page 73 is arranged in its proper order, saying in track number 3, page 73, being the day of atonement in type for both the dead and the living. This service of the earthly tabernacle therefore projects the day of atonement in its antitype, the cleansing of the sanctuary in heaven from unworthy names in the books, and the cleansing of the church on earth from its unconverted and unstable members, thus bringing the time of clean books. So first, clean books, and then clean church, and then clean people. We as a people we will never be clean, not until we will be brought into the promised land in Mount Zion, and there our hearts will be operated from stony hearts to the heart of flesh. But let us focus first to the first cleansing, clean books, and then clean church, and then clean people. Now, for example, brothers and sisters, the statement here in 1TG 26, let us read. 1TG number 26 on page 17. It says here, according to Christ's parables, the time his adversaries, his enemies of progressive truth, who are they? The adversaries of the Lord. That is the enemies of progressive truth. That is the only truth which constitute meat in due season. Progressive revelation of present truth. And that is why in answerer number 4 on page 38 and page 39, accordingly, with inspiration, inspiration is the human channel, the prophetic gift. Accordingly, with inspiration and progressive revelation, present truth, go the case. Progressive revelation of present truth. The best example is the statement in answerer number 1 on page 93, by which it says 40 years without refilling. How can it be true that no progressive truth was given to the church during the 40-year period from 1890 to 1930, when so many of Sister White's writings were published from 1890 to 1915? So this questioner makes an objection that according to him, how could it be that there is no progressive revelation of present truth from 1890 to 1930, while according to him, from 1890 to 1915, within 20, how many years is that? 25 years. Within 25 years, Sister White continuously publishing many inspired writings. And this is the answer given by the Shepherd's Rod. Though many of Sister White's manuscripts were published during the period of time stated above, yet a careful check will reveal that if any new revelation of timely Bible truth meet in due season was published therein, it was revealed to her before 1890. In fact, as early as 1871, she herself announced this cessation of light through the testimonies. I am authorized from God to tell you that not another ray of light through the testimonies will shine upon your pathway until you make a practical use of the light already given. Testimonies, Volume 2, page 606. So, logically, brethren, in that statement, it is very plain that present truth, progressive revelation of present truth, is not a message of repetition. That even the prophet herself are still continually publishing many inspired writings from 1890 to 1915. But the mere fact that the messages contained in that publications is only a message of repetition, then in that period of time, there was no more progressive revelation of present truth. How much more uninspired men? If you will be saying that because you are publishing the writings of B.T. Hotep, distributing the writings of B.T. Hotep in different lands, that is your proof that the present truth still within your borders, then you have the same argument with the Seventh-day Adventists in the days of B.T. Hotep. Because B.T. Hotep says, no, even though that Sister White continually published many writings, as a matter of fact, the writings that had been published by Sister White in 1890 to 1915 is new books. How much more of the Davidian? They are only publishing the same books that had been published already in the days of B.T. Hotep. And you say that you have the present truth because you are publishing the Shepherd's Rod publications. Well, brothers and sisters, each one of us has a right to voice out our ideas and opinion. But the only thing that I would like to say is the statement in Testimonies, Volume 1, 190. Dear friends, do not deceive your own self. We cannot deceive God. God knoweth our own spiritual condition. Now, I would like to read again the statement. In 1 TG 26:17, let us read the statement. 1 TG 26:17. According to Christ's parables, the time his adversaries, the enemies of progressive truth, are cut off is at the commencement of the purification of the church at the harvest time. When would be the enemies of progressive revelation of present truth? Those who hinder, those who oppose, they will be cut off, according to this reading in 1 TG 26:17. At the commencement of the purification of the church. So that is very plain. Now, let us connect, brethren, 1 TG. And it says that they will be cut off at the commencement of the purification of the church at the harvest time. Now, here's another statement in 1 TG number 17. Pages 3 and page 4. It says, 1 TG 17, pages 3 and 4. In short, the harvest is the day of cleansing, the day of judgment, the antitypical day of atonement, the day in which the sinners are cut off. Brothers and sisters, that is very plain. When does the sinners are cut off? On the antitypical day of atonement. Now, does this cutting off is slaughtering? Is there any statement in the Shepherd's Rod that the slaughtering will take place on the day of atonement? So, brethren, it is high time now to study closely the Shepherd's Rod publications. What does it mean by that phrase cut off? By which such cutting off will occur on the day of atonement. Who are they? The enemies of the progressive revelation of present truth. They will be cut off. When? At the commencement of the purification of the church. Now, let us go back again to our reading in track number 1, page 24 and page 24 and page 25. And the quotation is, let us read page 24 to get the full beam of light. Cry aloud, spare not, is the heartening order. Lift up thy voice like a trumpet, and show my people their transgression, and the house of Jacob their sins. Isaiah 58 verse 1. Take your stand, brother, sister, on the right side, and make sure, having done all, to stand, for no escaping the fact, the Lord has set his hand to separate the wicked from among the just, as is further seen in the light of the parables. And when the king came in to see the guest, he saw there a man which had not on a wedding garment. Then said the king to the servants, bind him hand and foot, and take him away, and cast him into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Matthew 22 verse 11 and 13. This investigation and casting out takes place before probation closes. For the marriage ceremony had not yet been performed at the time that the king came in to see the guest. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a net that was cast into the sea, and gathered of every kind, which when it was full, did throw to shore, and sat down and gathered the good into vessels, but cast the bad away. So shall it be at the end of the world. The angels shall come forth and sever the wicked from among the just, and shall cast them into the furnace of fire. There shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Matthew 13 verse 47 to 50. In this scripture too is seen the purification of the church, for the bad ones are taken away from among the good, and not the good from among the bad. That is, the bad that are in the net, the church are thrown out, and the good ones kept. So the voice of inspiration says that the purification of the church must be pertaining only to that separation by which it is the bad that had been taken out from among the righteous, from among the good, and not the good from among the bad. Now, for example, this is the church. If it is the righteous that will be taken out from in their midst, can you say that this church is purified? Then, if that is the case, then it is the righteous that pollute this church. That after the righteous that had been taken out, the church had been purified. So that is very logical. The only separation by which it is called purification of the church, brothers and sisters, if it is the wicked are taken out from among the righteous. So when all the wicked are taken out and the righteous alone that had been left, then this church had been purified. And that is called the first section of separation. But the voice of inspiration says the sealing of the 144,000. It is the righteous that had been taken out. Let us read 1 SR page 27. 1 SR page 27. It is positive that the sealing of the 144,000 is Ezekiel 9. 1 SR page 27. It is positive that the sealing of the 144,000 is Ezekiel 9. The separation, sifting in the church, the godly from the ungodly. Of course, the godly, that is the righteous. So it is the righteous that had been taken out from among the wicked. It is the godly that had been taken out from the ungodly. And that is the sealing of the 144,000. That is very plain in 1 SR page 27. And the mere fact that in the vision of the prophet, as quoted by the shepherd's rod, it says here in 1 SR 222, though such great apostasy and blasphemy has grieved the world, God's church, 144,000 in number, is scattered throughout the length and breadth of the earth, without a shepherd, have not bowed a knee to Baal. Why is it that the 144,000 scattered throughout the whole world without a shepherd? Because they came out from what movement they belong. Brothers and sisters, they came out from that movement. Brothers and sisters, we are approaching such destruction. The shepherd's rod is very plain in 2TG number 24. I would like to read 2TG 24, page 24 and 25.
This and all their followers and sympathizers perish. Who perish? This, the pronoun this is pointing to the leadership, as well as to their followers, as well as to their sympathizers. Perish. The earth opened her mouth and swallowed them up, and their houses. Houses represent membership. And that is pointing to the time, according to the shepherd's rod, when the sleeping multitude will be awakened from their spiritual insensibility. One symbolic code, number 14, page 6. It says, as Amos says, the habitations of the shepherds shall mourn. It is obvious that Amos' prophecy is yet future. For the word habitations, places, is in plural form, which cannot be applied to one shepherd's habitation, denomination, but to all that be in existence at that time. The term shepherds means, as understood, the same as the ancient men which were before the house, the ministers, where we could find the ancient men. That is very plain in track number 8 on page 24. It says, let's read, track number 8, page 24. It is located to John in the symbol of the two-horned beast coming up, not out of the sea, but out of the earth. Revelation 13, verse 11. The only place where trees naturally grow. Where? In the symbolical earth. The only place where trees naturally grow. And as according to Daniel 4, verse 20 to 22, trees are figurative of rulers. Therefore, the trees in this instance represent the ancient men before the house, Ezekiel 9, verse 6. You see, brothers and sisters, it says, a fact which reveals that in this period, the church headquarters are in the two-horned beast dominion, the new world, the earth. Track number 8, page 24. It was mistakenly quoted by many Davidian just to emphasize the headquarters, by which in reality, brothers and sisters, it will never recommend them before God. Now, let's go back again to the reading in one symbolic code number 14, page 6. The term shepherds means as understood the same as the ancient men which were before the house, the ministers. The Testimonies for the Church, volume 5, page 211. Note that the shepherds are not themselves to mourn, but their habitation, their houses, that is, the membership of their churches, which fact reveals that it will be thus at the time when the sleeping multitudes in the churches awake from their spiritual insensibility and find that the shepherds whom they have implicitly trusted for their salvation had deceived all those who followed them. One symbolic code number 14, page 6. But the 144,000, they will be profited by this rousing call, the true people of God. According to 2TG 24, on page 23, it says, the church therefore will not sleep forever. The true people of God will awake to their poverty. What poverty? Spiritual poverty, by which the only riches, spiritual riches, is the present truth. Without the present truth in our midst, then we are in a deep spiritual poverty. So the statement that these true people of God will be awakened to their poverty, they will recognize the absolute fact that the present truth was not in their movement, represented by the blood on the doorpost, by which the destroying angel will not enter into such movement by which there is a blood on the doorpost. That is the present truth. And as far as the shepherd's rod is thus concerned, the only movement, according to the General Conference Special, page 9, likewise, irrespective of consideration of personal faults, frailties, and failings, Elijah's message and movement will be the only God-sent ones, the only ones to fear, to love, to stand by, to live, or to die for. No, there will be no other shield when heaven opens and the storm breaks in all its dread fury upon the world to unavoidably pour down its lethal lightning from the skies. There is no other movement, according to the General Conference Special page 9, except the movement of Elijah. In the days of Betty Hodat, the movement of Elijah, antitypical Elijah, John the Baptist, is the only movement sent by God in that period of time. But in our days, only the movement of antitypical Elijah the Tisbite, the only movement, brothers and sisters, by which you can rest assured that God will protect your life. Here in 2TG 34, page 20, it says, I would like to read that to you. Only this church, without any doubt, that is the church by which the present week is bestowed by God. That is the 11th hour church. Only this church, you see, is favored even by the earth itself. This sect alone is saved from the dragon's flood, saved from being carried away by the flood of hypocrites and thieves in her midst. Then it says, here you see the remnant. Those who are left after the others are swallowed by the earth, so to speak, keeps the commandments of God and has the testimony of Jesus Christ. This remnant or sect that keeps the commandments of God, therefore, is the only one that inspiration recommends, the only one that is worth joining, the only one that can profit anyone. It alone possesses the power to escape any and all of the calamities that are now brewing throughout the world. It is the only sect that finds favor with God. No other would do, for no other could profit you. That is for sure the movement of Elijah, according to General Conference Special page 9. Now, I would like to read again the statement. It says here, in 2TG 24:23, the church, therefore, will not sleep forever. The true people of God will awake to their poverty. They will profit at this rousing call, meaning they will respond. Because the 11th hour movement, the last ordained ministry, according to the Voice of Inspiration, here in 2TG 43, page 11. Moreover, since the announcement of the separation of the saints from the sinners, so who will be to be separated? The saints from the sinners. It is the second section of separation. So let us distinctly separate the first of the first fruits and the first fruits. Because among the first of the first fruits, it is the wicked that will be taken out from their midst. But the first fruits, they will be taken out from among the wicked. The saints must be taken out from among the sinners. Whose sinners? The impenitent sinners. The enemies of the progressive revelation of present truth. Now, it says here, 2TG 43, page 11 and 12, moreover, since the announcement of the separation of the saints from the sinners originates with the 11th hour servants, the 11th hour servants here must be the advance guard, the first of the first fruits. Although the entire 144,000, later on, all of them will become the 11th hour servants. But first, pertaining to the first of the first fruits, and they will be the one to awaken the rest of the 144,000, to inform all the living saints to separate themselves. The same message given by Moses in Numbers 16, verse 21 and verse 26, before the earth will open her mouth. Number 16, verse 21, separate yourselves from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment. Verse 26, and he spake unto the congregation, saying, depart, I pray you, from the tents of these wicked men, and touch nothing of theirs, lest ye be consumed in all their sins. Number 16, 21 and 22. But to the followers and sympathizers of Korah, Datam, and Abiram, to them it is Moses which is wicked. To them, Korah, Datam, and Abiram are righteous. But what happened? According to 2PG 24:22, Korah, Datam, and Abiram perished together with their followers and sympathizers. Now let us read again the statement here in 2PG 43:11. Moreover, since the announcement of the separation of the saints from the sinners originates with the 11th hour servants. And since they are to cry aloud and say, awake, awake, put on the strength of Zion, put on the beautiful garments of Jerusalem, the holy city, for henceforth there shall no more come unto thee the uncircumcised and the unclean. And also to say, behold upon the mountains the feet of him that bringeth good tidings, that publisheth peace of Judah. Keep thy solemn feast, perform thy vows, for the wicked shall no more pass through thee, he is utterly cut off. It follows that without the 11th hour message and servants, the church Zion would be left sleeping forever, never to behold the feet of him who bring these good tidings, of him who publisheth peace, and never to put on her beautiful garments, never to be fitted for the kingdom. Now, what solemn feast is specifically pointing? Let us read 1 TG number 3, page 15. Nahum 1 verse 15. Let us read. Here we are told that at the time the war is fought, someone is to be publishing inspired revelations of newly revealed truth. The truth of the judgment of the living, the which is to forever separate the wheat, from the tares, the good fish from the bad, the sheep from the goats, and the wise virgins from the foolish ones. So this is the second section of separation. It is the righteous that have been taken out to separate the wheat from the tares. In reality, according to the shepherd's rod, in 1 SR 228, it says, the wheat represents the 144,000. 1 SR page 228. The wheat represents the 144,000. Now the statement says, to forever separate the wheat from the tares. It is not the tares that had been taken out, but rather the wheat had been taken out from among the tares. The good fish from the bad, the sheep from the goats, the wise virgin from the foolish ones. The second section of separation. And then it says, this shall no more pass through the church, declares the scriptures. They are utterly cut off, thus urging Judah, the church, to keep this antitypical atonement feast. So the feast mentioned in Nahum 1 verse 15 is pointing particularly to the Day of Atonement, to keep this antitypical atonement feast and to perform her vows to God so as to be found worthy of escaping the judgments of God. That is very plain, brothers and sisters. So one specific feast mentioned in Nahum 1 verse 15, the Day of Atonement. So the term cut off on the Day of Atonement cannot be the literal slaughtering, brothers and sisters. Cannot be the literal slaughtering, because the literal slaughtering takes place on the Passover week, not on the Day of Atonement. And cut off is pointing to the purification in the heavenly sanctuary, and that is blotting out the names. Now let us read again the statement. 1 TG, number 11, page 10. The cleansing of the sanctuary, Daniel 8:14. The purification of it by blotting out from the books. Blotting out from the books. Of course, that is the names of the wicked to be blotted out from the books. That is called purification. Now, when does the enemies of the progressive revelation of present truth to be cut off? At the commencement of the purification, but not the commencement of the purification. That pertains to the dead, because it was already in the past, October 22, 1844. Now, let us read again, 1 TG 26, page 17. It is the commentary on Micah chapter 5, verse 9. Micah chapter 5, verse 9. Thine hand shall be lifted up upon thine adversaries, and all thine enemies shall be cut off. All. Then it says here in 1 TG 26:17, according to Christ's parables, the time his adversaries, his enemies of progressive truth, are cut off is at the commencement of the purification of the church at the harvest time. Now, brothers and sisters, Harvest time. We know that there are two sections of the harvest. There are two sections of the harvest. First fruits and second fruits. Think it thoroughly, brothers and sisters. Harvest time is a provisionary time. The shepherd's rod is very plain, explaining harvest time. Harvest time is a provisionary time. When thus, brothers and sisters, the enemies of the progressive revelation of present truth, they will be cut off at the commencement of the harvest time. So the harvest time, the commencement of the harvest time, is the time by which the enemies of progressive of revelation of present truth are cut off. That is the commencement. Now, brothers and sisters, to repeat again, in 1 TG number 17, page 3 and 4, it says, in short, the harvest is the day of cleansing, the day of judgment, the antithetical day of atonement, the day in which the sinners are cut off. When does the sinners are cut off? On the antithetical day of atonement. It could not be the slaughtering, literal slaughtering, because the literal slaughtering takes place on the Passover week, according to 2SR page 260. Then that cut off that takes place on the day of atonement, brothers and sisters, is the harvest in the heavenly sanctuary. For example, I would like to review track number 3, page 42, page 43, pages 42 and 43. In both of these parables, Christ is sounding the forewarning that the investigative judgment will take place in the time called harvest, which is the end of the world, the time in which the 2,300 days culminate. When does the 2,300 days culminate? October 22, 1842. That is the commencement of the investigative judgment, by which that is the time of harvest. But harvest that pertains to the dead. According to 2TG number 11, pages 12 and 13, it says, 2TG 11, pages 12 and 13. For example, after the harvest, investigative judgment of the dead is passed. Other truths even more important must be introduced for the harvest of the living. I say more important truths because they are concerning the living themselves, concerning those whose own cases are to be weighed in the balances. Where to be weighed? Is it on earth or in heaven? Those who personally are to be judged either as wheat or as tares, either as good fish or as bad fish. So that is the harvest that pertains to the living, which is even more important, and that is the Day of Atonement. I would like to read to you again, 2SR 162. It says, when the judgment opened in 1844, as previously explained, the investigation began with the dead. And when that part of the work is finished, then commences the judgment of the living. While the investigation for the congregation of the dead is in progress, there can be no separation among the congregation of the living. But when our high priest shall begin the atonement for the living, there must be a message of present truth, sounding of the trumpet, urging everyone to lay hold on the Lamb of God, which is Jesus Christ, by which only can he in figure come to the sanctuary, confess his sin, and secure his life. Unless the close of the judgment for the dead and the commencement for the living be made known to us, we would have no present truth while the judgment for the living is in session. Neither would such judgment be legal or just. He who fails to respond to the heavenly summons will be left without the seal or covering of God, and therefore must be cut off from among his people, as prefigured by the services in the typical Day of Atonement, 2SR 164. Brothers and sisters, that statement is very plain. The heavenly summons that is a message coming from the presiding judge. And since that summons is called heavenly, it cometh from God the Father. It is served to the 144,000 living saints to inform them the coming Day of Atonement. For what purpose? So that their names will not be blotted out. Brothers and sisters, let us distinctly separate, brethren, the blotting out of sins of the 144,000 and the blotting out of names among the congregation of the living. That is different Day of Atonement. Because at the time when the 144,000 living saints received the Pentecostal power, I would like to could understand. At the time when they received the Pentecostal power, their sins at that time are not yet blotted out. Track number 3 on page 76. Page 75, 1934, supplement. Comparison of the two Pentecosts. The comparisons of the two Pentecosts are perfect. The first fruits only of both being numbered, 120 in the one and 144,000 in the other. The innumerable company that was brought into the church after the Pentecost foreshadowed the great multitude of the final harvest, which no man could number, of all nations and kindreds and people and tongues. Revelation 7 verse 9. The typical wave loaves will signify the completion of the first fruit harvest. Leviticus 22 verse 17 were baking with leaven to symbolize that the sins were not blotted out at the time the servants of our God were sealed. Hence, the investigative judgment for the living, blotting out the sins, will begin after the sealing of the 144,000, the spiritual wave loaves, and after the outpouring of the Spirit, the leaven may have a still deeper meaning. Now, ponder deeply so that you could visualize the proper orders of events, brothers and sisters. According to the voice of inspiration, I would like to make a simple illustration. So, of course, Pentecost, that is on the third month, June. Now, let us just place blank. Pentecost, 144,000 received the Pentecostal power. At this time, when they received the Pentecostal power, their sins were not yet blotted out. Now, since the Pentecost will be poured out on June, and the Day of Atonement must be in October 10, therefore, from the time they received that Pentecostal power, their sins were not yet blotted out, and it will be blotted out June, July, August, September, October, at least 5 months from the time they received the Pentecostal power. That is 5 months after their sins had been blotted out. But I would like to read to you, brothers and sisters, the statement in track number 1. Let us read. Track number 1 on page 38 and page 39. Track number 1, page 38 and 39. After the sighing and crying ones were marked, which is not to be understood as being consummated in its entirety worldwide before the slaying follows anywhere, the slaughter completed and the matter reported. I would like to read again. After the sighing and crying ones were marked, which is not to be understood as being consummated in its entirety worldwide before the slaying follows anywhere, the slaughter completed and the matter reported. Which will come first, the reporting or the slaughter? It seems that the slaughter takes place before the matter reported, because it says the slaughter completed and the matter reported. Now let us read 1SR, then we will go back here in track number 1, page 38 and 30. 1SR, page 38. The men with the slaughter weapons were already slaying before the man with the writer's inkhorn returned to report the matter that he had done as he was commanded. Let us read again the statement in 1SR, page 38. The men with the slaughter weapons were already slaying before the man with the writer's inkhorn returned to report the matter that he had done as he was commanded. So this reading is very plain. The slaughtering precedes the reporting, because the 5 men with slaughtering weapons were already slaying before the man with the writer inkhorn reported to Jesus. Remember, the man with the writer inkhorn reported to Jesus while Jesus Christ was still on the threshold of the house. That is very plain in answerer number 5. Now let us go back to track number 1. Pages 38 and page 39. He says, after the sighing and crying ones were marked, which is not to be understood as being consummated in its entirety worldwide before the slaying follows anywhere, we can understand that the slaying mentioned here cannot be worldwide. Brothers and sisters, this must be the antitypical slaughtering by which the slaughtering took place only in the land of Egypt. If you still remember, according to the Shepherd's Rod, here in Symbolical, number 1, page 8. Therefore, as there are 2 separations, there is a double fulfillment of Ezekiel's slaughter, one in the church before the close of provision, and the other in the worldly churches after the close of provision. Brethren, well, there are only two places mentioned there to be slaughtered, the church and the worldly churches. Now, I would like to place here, worldly churches. Those who are in the worldly churches, they will be slaughtered after the close of provision, according to the shepherd's rod, after the close of provision. But the slaughtering in the church takes place before the close of provision. Before the close of provision. Who are they? The church mentioned here. And who are they? The worldly churches. According to tract number 8, page 61, saying, the work of Elijah is particularly typifying the slaughter in the church. Therefore, antitypical Elijah, he knows his work to inform the church, this church, to escape the slaughter. Because the slaughtering in the church takes place before probation closes. First of all, brothers and sisters, the shepherd's rod made it so plain. In 1 TG number 3, it says, 1 TG 3, page 12, and it is entitled The Purification of the Church. The angels have charge of the city, Jerusalem, not of the world and not of Babylon. Even an altogether uninformed Christian knows that the terms Jerusalem, Judah, and Israel mean the church, never even as much as imply the world. They have always meant the church and always will mean the church, for that is what they are. Now ponder deeply this reading. Here's the statement in Three Symbolic Code number 1, page 8. The slaughtering in Ezekiel 9 has a double fulfillment. First in the church and then in the worldly churches. It did not say the church in the world. That is different. But rather, the worldly churches. Because the term Jerusalem, Judah, and Israel, recorded in Ezekiel 9, mean the church, never as much implies as the world. So worldly churches cannot be the church in the world, but they must be Sabbath keepers. But worldly churches, that is very clear, brothers and sisters. Now let us go back to tract number 1. Go back again to tract number 1. Pages 38 and page 39. After the sighing and crying ones were marked, which is not to be understood as being consummated in its entirety worldwide, before the slaying follows anywhere, the slaughter completed, and the matter reported, the Lord spake unto the man clothed with linen, and said, Go in between the wheels, even under the cherub, and fill thine hand with coals of fire from between the cherubims, and scatter them over the city. Ezekiel 10 verse 2. The scattering of the coals of fire over the city represents absolute purification of the heart. Gospel Workers, page 23. Effected by the outpouring of the Holy Spirit upon those who receive the mark, those who escape the slaughter. Now, ponder deeply with the sequence of events according to that reading in tract number 1, page 38 and 39. According to that reading, that those who escape the slaughter receive the Pentecostal power, the 144,000. And according to 1 TG, the purpose of the outpouring of the Holy Ghost, let us read 1 TG number 17. 1 TG number 17, page 4, it says, Then in order to quickly gather the second fruits, God pours His Spirit upon every first fruit saint. So what is the purpose why God poured out the Pentecostal power to the 144,000 living saints? To gather the second fruits. Now let us go back again, brothers and sisters. The shepherds declared clearly that when they received the Pentecost, their sins were not yet blotted out. So the blotting out of sins of the 144,000 is after the outpouring of the Pentecost. But the shepherds were very plain that before the Pentecost had been poured out to the 144,000 living saints, it says the slaughtering is completed. The slaughtering is completed. And the matter reported. And after that two events, God commanded the man with linen to pour out the Holy Spirit to the 144,000. So what I'm trying to emphasize, brothers and sisters, is that before the slaughtering will take place, which is the destruction of the sinners in the church, the blotting out of names must take place first. According to 1TG number 6, let's read 1TG number 6, page 38. It says, it is obvious that they escape the destruction of these sinners in the church. Isaiah 4 verse 3. And it shall come to pass that he that is left in Zion and he that remaineth in Jerusalem shall be called holy, even everyone that is written among the living in Jerusalem. Then it says, only the holy ones, those whose names are left written in the book, escape the destructions that falls upon the wicked in the church. What is the destruction? The wicked in the church is slaughtering. Brothers and sisters, and who are they that had not been slaughtered? Those whose names are left written in the book. Then for sure, those that had been slaughtered are those names that had been blotted out. And it says, only they constitute the remnant, the ones that are left. 1TG number 6, page 38. So this statement in 1SR 177, it says, that is after the separation, purification, those who are left, the 144,000, being the remnant, the affliction is the time of purification. The affliction is what? The time of purification. So that is the message that while we are approaching the Day of Atonement, we need to afflict our souls. That is the time of affliction. White House Recruiter on page 21, it says, and that anyone who then, during the antithetical Day of Atonement for the dead, should be found among the dead with his sins unconfessed, his soul not afflicted, and without the wedding garment on, would be cut off from among his people. So, if you will connect this reading on 1934, Tract 3 Supplement, on page 76, it says, now to prove that Sister White's writings are in perfect harmony with the testimonies of the prophets, we quote from the Great Controversy, page 425, showing that the purification of the church took place while the investigative judgment of the dead was going on. So, to show to you, brothers and sisters, so this is very plain. That is why let us distinctly separate the proceedings in the most holy place, blotting out of sins. And during the proceedings in the most holy place, blotting out of sins that pertain to the dead saints, it is already the purification among the congregation of the living that is in the holy place. And that what White House Recruiter is telling you and me, saying that during the investigative judgment that pertains to the dead, that is in the most holy place, those on earth who are not afflicting their souls, their names will be blotted out on that Day of Atonement. So on that Day of Atonement, on the holy place, blotting out of names in the congregation of the living, but in the most holy place, blotting out of sins under the sixth seal. That is why let us distinctly separate the opening of the seventh seal in the most holy place and the opening of the seventh seal in the holy place. The opening of the seventh seal in the holy place precedes the opening of the seventh seal in the most holy place. So the figurative slaughtering is the blotting out of names. And that's what it means by the word cut off. And that is why B.T. Hotep says in answerer number 2, on page 43, it says, Ezekiel 9, whether literal or figurative, affects a separation between the good and the bad, the tares and the wheat in the church, Judah and Israel. If that separation takes place on the Day of Atonement, then that is figurative. Figurative Ezekiel 9. But if it takes place on the Passover week, that is the literal slaughtering. Now here is very plain. In tract number 3, 1934 edition, page 76, it says, showing that the purification of the church took place while the investigative judgment of the dead, meaning the proceedings is in the most holy place, was going on. And just before the commencement of the loud cry of the third angel's message, the harvest. So we are now in the harvest of the living. Since October 11, 2021 in Bible calendar, but in Gregorian, that is April 2, 2020. And it will culminate on March 27, 2021, the Day of Atonement. That is the harvest in the heavenly sanctuary. But the harvest on earth There is no harvest on the Day of Atonement. That is during the Passover week. The offering of the wave sheep and the offering of the wave loaves. So let us distinctly separate the harvest in the heavenly sanctuary and the harvest on the earthly sanctuary. Because the harvest in the heavenly sanctuary takes place on the Day of Atonement. But there is no harvest on the Day of Atonement on the earthly sanctuary. Brethren, although it is still a long study, but to those who desire to understand the entire proceedings, brothers and sisters, I would like to show to you first. We will explain it later. This diagram. And first, see this diagram, brethren. The 40 days marking and the 40 days slaying, number 170. It is found in track number 3, page 86. Track number 3, page 86. The 40 days in Acts chapter 1, verse 3 and 9. From the resurrection to the ascension are consequently typical of the period from 1844 to the fulfillment of the marking and slaying as recorded in Ezekiel 9 and Revelation 7, verse 3 to 8. Revelation 14, verse 1 to 5, respectively, and in Testimonies to Ministers, page 445. Testimonies for the Church, volume 3, 266. Also, early writers, page 270. Let us distinctly separate the literal slaughtering because there are only two literal slaughtering. The literal slaughtering before the close of provision and the literal slaughtering after the close of provision concerning Ezekiel 9. Not Revelation 7 and not Revelation 9:18. Because the description of the slaughtering of Revelation 7, Revelation chapter 7 and Revelation 9:18 is that Revelation 7 will takes place, that slaying before the loud cry, but Revelation 9:18 is during the loud cry. That is the division of the slaughtering in Revelation. The slaughtering before the loud cry and the slaughtering during the loud cry. Let me read to you that reading. It says here, 2 Symbolic Code 7 and 8, page 11. 2 Symbolic Code 7 and 8, page 11. Those who are slain before the commencement of the loud cry, in fulfillment of Isaiah 66, verse 16, are professed Sabbath keepers who fail in the time of the closing work for the church to receive the seal of God. Testimonies for the Church, volume 3, page 266. See the September Code of 1935, page 7. However, those who are slain in fulfillment of Revelation 9, verse 18, see our track, final warning, the subject of 7 trumpets. In the time of the loud cry are those who come in close contact with the church of God and who could be either heathen or professed Christians of several characters. 2 Symbolic Code 7 and 8, page 11. Although Isaiah 66, verse 16 is applied to both Ezekiel 9 and Revelation 7. But to repeat again, brothers and sisters, the slaying concerning Revelation, the dividing line is before the loud cry and during the loud cry. But the slaughtering concerning Ezekiel 9 is before the close of provision and after the close of provision. Before the close of provision, that slaughtering consists only 1 hour. But the slaughtering after the close of provision, that is 7 days. 7 literal days. So let us distinctly separate the slaughtering before the close of provision and the slaughtering after the close of provision. Now, to those who wish to understand this message, although it needs more time to explain the 40 days marking and the 40 days slaying, found in track number 3, page 86. Very broad paragraph. That in that paragraph reveals almost all the entire proceedings, both in the heavenly sanctuary and on the earthly sanctuary. This is the literal 40 days. The type. April 18, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. May 27, the ascension. Then the remaining days is 13 plus 27 equals 40. Now, ponder deeply, brothers and sisters. September 4, we will explain. This is the very day, the expiration of the 5 symbolical months. September 4, 2020 is the expiration of the 5 symbolical months. All can send questions regarding the subject. Although we did not as yet explain to you why the expiration of the 5 symbolical months expire on September 4, 2020. This year, this day, September 4, we will discuss in the subject that 12 figurative months. In September 4, 2020, remaining days 27, right? 21. 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. 27. Then, remaining days in April 18, 31, 18, 13. 27 plus 13 equals 2. And we will show to you that September 4 is the only date 2020. There is no other date, the expiration of the 5 symbolical months, except September 4, 2020. What will happen from September 4, 2020 onwards? That is the most important part that we are going to discuss, brothers and sisters. You can see here, September 4, 2020, 40 days marking, because that is the statement in track number 3, page 86, saying that the 40 days from Christ's resurrection to his ascension are consequently typical of the period from 1844 to the fulfillment of the marking and slaying as recorded in Ezekiel chapter 9 and also Revelation 7. Now from September 4 up to October 13, 2020, brothers and sisters, that is 40 days marking of the 144,000 living saints in the heavenly sanctuary. Their names, the 140, or in other words, in October 13, 2020, the entire 144,000 living saints, their names will already mark that their names will never be blotted out on that coming day of atonement because they were already marked. And we will explain to you through the writings of the Shepherd's Rod publications. I think it is necessary to inform you that this day, the marking in the heavenly sanctuary commenced. I would like to read first the statement in 12 symbolic code, and this is the last reading, and we will continue. In 12 symbolic code number 3, on page 18, it says, as to whether this work of separation or investigation of who has and who has not the wedding garment is now taking place, I may say that it is not. 12 symbolic code 3:18. The question is, when does the judgment of the living commence? So, I would like to read this statement. As to whether this work of separation or investigation of who has and who has not the wedding garment is now taking place, I may say that it is not. For the reason that we are now in the marking time of Ezekiel chapter 9, not yet in the time of investigation, who has the mark and who has it not. The marking itself is not the separation. And it says, not a work of the sanctuary in heaven. The BT Hotel is emphasizing the marking on the earthly sanctuary, brothers and sisters. And the marking on the earthly sanctuary, it says, it is not a work of the sanctuary in heaven. But let us study also the marking that takes place in the sanctuary in heaven. Brethren, BT Hotel did not as yet have the complete understanding concerning the entire proceedings, more particularly in the heavenly sanctuary. He himself declared in answerer number 1, on page 95, it says, so while it was not exactly understood beforehand, answerer number 1, page 95, so while it was not exactly understood beforehand what the nature of the event would be, yet when the fullness of the time came, and no other event occurred but this one, it was thereby identified as the one predicted in Ezekiel chapter 4, in connection with the end of the 430 prophetic years when the scroll was to unroll another term. Although still a good subject concerning the 430 years. But what I'm trying to emphasize here is that BT Hotel do not have a complete understanding concerning the nature of the event in the heavenly sanctuary. But for sure, all the information, necessary information concerning the proceedings in the heavenly sanctuary is already reported in the Shepherd's Rod publication. The only thing is that not all that BT Hotel had written that he had been able to understand. The same situation with Daniel and John the Beloved. They are the authors of their own books, the writers, but they themselves do not understand all the messages that they have written. The situation is the same with Brother Hotel. But for sure, all the necessary information concerning the proceedings in the heavenly sanctuary is already recorded in the Shepherd's Rod publication. We'll continue this subject, brethren, and to repeat again, we need to ascertain clearly the slaughtering before the close of provision. That slaughtering is only 1 hour, literal 1 hour. Therefore, let us distinctly separate the half-hour silence, which is literal, and the half-hour silence, which is symbolic. 7 days. 7 days is slaughtering. That is after the close of provision. We will prove to you through the Shepherd's Rod publications. The slaughtering before the close of provision and the slaughtering after the close of provision. And the slaughtering before the loud cry and the slaughtering during the loud cry. Thank you very much for listening during this program. May the good Lord bless you. Have a beautiful